The next phase. Debate continues over what should be included in another COVID-19 stimulus bill. We're on Capitol Hill. Coronavirus and the classroom. The Archdiocese of St. Louis announces its plans for its Catholic schools this fall. A sign of hope. An update on a church in Syria that had been bombed at least 3 times. And a surprise visitor. The Vatican is hosting its first summer camp for the children of employees. Find out who stopped by. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, July 21st, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. The White House is slamming Democrats for allowing mayhem to continue in cities like Portland, Oregon, and says President Donald Trump wants to restore law and order. Meanwhile, Vice President Pence travels to South Carolina to push for the reopening of schools. White House correspondent Owen Jensen is following both those stories for us tonight. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany wasted no time decrying the type of violence taking place in Portland. At the same time, some local officials, they don't want the feds' help at all and are saying, get out. In Portland, Oregon, more unrest, tear gas canisters deployed.
By any objective standard, the violence, chaos, and anarchy in Portland is unacceptable.
White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany says President Donald Trump will not give the violence a pass.
Individuals have thrown bricks, chunks of concrete, glass bottles, feces, balloons filled with paint, pig's feet, slingshots to hurl ball bearings, and batteries at federal agents and the courthouse.
It's literally the federal government coming into a situation that local officials were addressing and making it much worse.
The Democratic mayor of New York thinks it's a big mistake to send in more federal officers to cities like Portland.
It's totally backfired. It's totally made things worse. It's created a huge amount of pain and confusion and anger in that community.
Meanwhile, the pandemic. To date, according to the press secretary, 46 million tests done. The president tweeting tremendous progress being made on vaccines and therapeutics, and the costs of staying shut down, not just economic.
When you have the fact that the American Cancer Society saying that during the pandemic we saw an 80% drop in cancer cases being identified, there are real costs to a draconian extended shutdown.
And in South Carolina, the vice president and second lady pushing schools to reopen.
So thank you to all the parents.
Calling parents the unsung heroes, teleworking and juggling Zoom meetings, adding to their stress. And as a teacher herself, she's eager to get back in the classroom.
But it's our kids who are struggling. And they need their friends. And they need their teachers.
Finally tonight, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden announced a 10-year, $775 billion plan he says would create 3 million jobs caring for older Americans. Tracy?
White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Thanks so much, Owen. On Capitol Hill, Senate leaders are locking horns over what should be included in the next COVID-19 relief bill. Democrats say the $3 trillion HEROES Act has everything America needs. Republicans, however, are calling for a more nuanced approach. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, Tracy, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says Republicans are focusing on 3 pillars. That includes jobs, kids, and health care for the next coronavirus relief bill. And he's calling on the cooperation of Democrats to help draft up this plan. But Democratic leader Chuck Schumer says that Leader McConnell's efforts are already falling on deaf ears.
Yesterday, Leader McConnell once again called for the same spirit of bipartisanship that helped us pass the CARES Act. Well, Leader McConnell, writing a bill in your own office without any input from Democrats, dropping it on the floor and demanding that Democrats support it is no one's idea of bipartisanship.
But GOP Senator John Cornyn tells me Republicans are pushing for more funding in many areas Democrats support too.
I know we'll probably end up doing more to help the states and local governments who provide essential services like police and fire protection.
In a tweet earlier this month, President Trump wrote, quote, "The Dems think it would be bad for them politically if U.S. schools open before the November election, but is important for the children and families. May cut off funding if not open." The Democratic leader criticized the president for that message.
The president is pressuring schools to reopen this fall without the necessary resources or guidance to keep our kids safe.
But today, the Republican leader says,
parents, teachers, and doctors all agree that it has to be as safe as possible. That's where the Senate comes in. And this majority is preparing legislation that will send $105 billion so that educators have the resources they need to safely reopen.
And Senator Cornyn agrees.
The biggest issue, I think, of all right now is how do we safely get our kids back to school? And we need to be able to give them and their parents and teachers confidence that we can do so safely.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows is here on Capitol Hill. I did speak with him in the hallway as he came out of one of the senator's office, and he told me that discussions are still very early right now, but he says that he is confident that Republicans and Democrats can find a sweet spot and come up with a deal to help families and still be fiscally responsible. Another thing he said, Tracy, that we can all do is pray. And I said, not a problem. We'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Eric. Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Well, the Archdiocese of St. Louis says its schools will resume in-person classes when the academic year starts next month. Each of the 100 or so institutions will follow guidelines from local government officials. Nearly 24 students at an area Catholic high school tested positive for COVID-19 following an outdoor graduation and prom earlier this month. And in Texas, the state attorney general says religious schools are exempt from local coronavirus precautionary measures. In a letter last week, Ken Paxton says local governments are not allowed to close religious institutions, nor can they dictate strategies to those institutions. Some counties in Texas have barred in-person classes for private and public schools at least through the end of August. EU leaders agree on a $2 trillion deal, but in an apparent jab at Poland and Hungary, the Dutch Prime Minister wanted to link funds to the rule of law. The Prime Minister of Hungary objected.
It is not acceptable that anybody, especially those who inherited the rule of law, criticize us, the freedom fighters, who came from a very difficult period of communist times and did a lot against the communist regime in favor of rule of law.
The summit in Brussels wrapped up after 4 days of haggling. Exhausted leaders were seen leaving the lengthy talks this morning. They established an $850 billion coronavirus fund and also agreed on the EU budget of worth more than $1 trillion. Pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong marked the one-year anniversary since a group of them were violently attacked in a subway station. A large police presence in Hong Kong this morning. Today's anniversary comes as the UK, the United States, Australia, and Canada are scrapping the extradition treaty with Hong Kong. The treaty lets anyone who is suspected of a crime in Hong Kong to be handed over to police in mainland China. The Vatican is preparing its first pilgrimage to Lourdes, France, since the coronavirus lockdown began. The trip will take place at the end of the month. It is being organized by the Diocese of Rome. The theme of the journey is to give thanks and entrust everything to Our Lady. It is the organization's first pilgrimage since last February. Joining us now is Father Giovanni Bialo from the Diocese of Rome's Pilgrimage Office. Father, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. Can you talk about how you're preparing for your first pilgrimage while the pandemic is still going on?
Yes, the situation now for the pilgrimage is a little bit difficult because we can't visit many countries that are closed for the situation of the sanity. So in this moment we can visit only the holy places in Europe, so like Lourdes, like Fatima, where the situation is more or less like in Italy. But we can't go in Middle East, we can go to Caucasus, so Armenia, Georgia, and naturally Israel and Jordan, Egypt. So this country we hope to visit in the last months, so in autumn.
Father, I'm curious, how many people are expected to attend?
So we are, for example, organizing now a pilgrimage for the end of August with the Diocese of Rome, with the participation of the Cardinal of Rome. And we will go there with 200 people, so a big group, maybe the first big group that we are bringing to a holy place in this year. We hope for the other holy places to go there with small groups of people. We hope in September, October to reach Jerusalem, and there with a small group of people will be easier to respect also all the situation, the rules, the new rules of the sanity.
You just mentioned some pilgrimages, that is, taking place in September and October. What are they, and what will happen if there's a second wave of the virus? Are you prepared for that?
When we go to Lourdes, we will go really for a pilgrimage. So we go to pray, to visit the grotto of the Virgin, to visit the places where the Saint Bernadette lived. And so we can say that the pilgrimages in this time will be really, really occasion of improve the faith and to pray, really pray, to thank the Lord for the risk that we had, that many people are saved from this risk, and to pray that the situation in the future will become better.
Well, Father, thank you so much for coming on, for your time today. We really appreciate it, and for what you do as well. Father Giovanni Bialo from the Diocese of Rome's Pilgrimage Office. Thank you again, Father.
Thank you. Good work.
Coming up, new developments in a gunman's attack on the husband and son of a New Jersey judge. Planned Parenthood of Greater New York is removing the name of Margaret Sanger, a founder of the national organization, from its Manhattan clinic. The abortion provider says it made the decision because of Sanger's, quote, harmful connections to the eugenics movement. Pro-lifers are responding. In a statement, Susan B. Anthony List says, quote, the next step for Planned Parenthood is recognizing that Margaret Sanger's racist legacy continues today, as abortion continues to disproportionately impact minority communities, especially the Black community. Joining me now on Skype to talk more about this is Dr. Angela Franks, author of the book Margaret Sanger's Eugenics Legacy and professor of theology at St. John's Seminary in Boston. Dr. Franks, welcome to the show. So glad to have you. Let's start right there with the legacy of Margaret Sanger. For people not familiar with the term eugenics, what exactly is it?
The eugenics movement divided people up into either the so-called fit or unfit based on their genetic health and capability. And Sanger completely bought into that movement. It really had its heyday between the 19-teens and really up through World War II. And she was an active part of that movement.
What are some of the views that Sanger espoused when it came to race?
Yeah, with race, it's a little more complicated. Not all eugenicists were racist, and it's really, we don't have a lot of, I think, absolutely clear evidence. Some people think she definitely was a racist. I'm inclined to think she probably wasn't, but it's very clear that she was a eugenicist. And so that means that she considered as unfit people who were poor, people who had physical disabilities or mental or cognitive disabilities, and she considered those people to be, she said at one point, they're like weeds that they shouldn't reproduce. And she considered her work in promoting birth control to be part of promoting a eugenic vision.
I know the board chair of Planned Parenthood of Greater New York said in a statement that removing Sanger's name actually acknowledges, quote, Planned Parenthood's contributions to historical reproductive harm within communities of color, end quote. What do you know about Planned Parenthood's history in that respect and its impact today on communities of color, especially the African American community?
Yeah, one of the things Planned Parenthood said today is that this is long overdue. And that, I think, maybe is the only thing that I've ever agreed with Planned Parenthood about on anything. This is long overdue because Sanger wove into the fabric of Planned Parenthood this eugenic idea that we can just decide that some people should not have children for their benefit and for the benefit of society, and that somehow that's something we get to decide. And the way this cashes out concretely with Planned Parenthood is that you see that they have more clinics in poorer neighborhoods and economically disadvantaged areas. They've said in publications in the past that their target population are people who are impoverished, and that also includes obviously racial minorities. They are much more present in minority neighborhoods than they are in white neighborhoods. And so I think we see concretely how this eugenic worldview of Sanger's that she wove into the fabric of Planned Parenthood, how that cashes out today.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your perspective with us. We really appreciate it. Dr. Angela Franks, thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, the FBI says the prime suspect in a New Jersey attack at a federal judge's home is dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The suspect is believed to have allegedly murdered Daniel Androl, the son of U.S. District Judge Esther Salas, and wounded her husband, defense lawyer Mark Androl. Now investigators are looking into ties to a previous killing in California. Correspondent Mark Irons reports for us. Mark?
Tracy, Roy Den Hollander, a self-described anti-feminist lawyer, is the suspect here, found dead after that horrific weekend attack at Judge Salas's home in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Police believe he could be connected to a similar attack that left a fellow men's rights attorney dead on the West Coast. And tonight we're remembering the judge's son, who was a student at the Catholic University of America.
Federal agents probing if Roy Den Hollander, suspected of posing as a FedEx driver when he opened fire at Judge Esther Salas's home Sunday, had any role in the killing of lawyer Mark Angelucci earlier this month in San Bernardino County, California.
It's just shocking to find this out.
A childhood friend of Daniel Androl can't believe he's gone after a fatal gunshot wound. The attacker also wounded his father, defense lawyer Mark Androl. Daniel's mother, Judge Esther Salas, was at home during the attack, but unharmed.
They're honestly a great family, very generous, they would always donate, His dad coached my basketball team when I was younger, and both of us coached our Little League team growing up.
In racist, often misogynistic writings, Roy Den Hollander had been openly critical of Judge Esther Salas. Now the Catholic University of America is mourning the loss of her son, a rising junior, who made the dean's list last semester. The president of Catholic University saying, "We all mourn and grieve this loss to our university community." Monday night, a mass was offered for Daniel and his family.
You just think this was a great kid that I had in an intro class, and I look forward to having him, again.
Dr. Chad Pecknold, a theology professor at CUA, was shocked to learn he had lost one of his students. Last semester, Daniel took his class studying readings like the Confessions of St. Augustine.
These were really rich texts that he absorbed and was eager to, gain all the wisdom he could from those. And so, I know that he was a person of deep faith.
Attorney General William Barr says this investigation in New Jersey will continue, adding this kind of lawless, evil action carried out against a member of the federal judiciary will not be tolerated. And Tracy, Judge Salas was assigned to a case involving Deutsche Bank's failure to monitor high-risk customers, including convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Tracy.
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting for us tonight. Thank you so much, Mark. Up next, Pope Francis makes an unexpected appearance to a group at the Vatican. We'll explain. And what's being described as a sign of hope and rebirth, a badly damaged Catholic cathedral reopens in war-torn Syria. The Maronite Cathedral of St. Elijah in the northern city of Aleppo was bombarded with missiles on at least 3 occasions between 2012 and 2016. It also suffered extensive damage when jihadists entered the city's Christian quarter in 2013. The 19th century cathedral reopened yesterday following renovations. Joining me now on Skype to tell us more is Edward Clancy, Director of Outreach for Aid to the Church in Need USA. Edward, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So this reopening has been a long time coming. Can you talk a little bit about the cathedral's history and what the restoration symbolizes for the Christians of Aleppo?
Sure. The cathedral was built on a 15th century chapel, so it has a 500 or 600 year history in the region. And back in between 2012 and 13, there was numerous attacks on it. In fact, when the Archbishop of Aleppo of the Melkite Church was visiting, the cathedral was actually bombed on the day that he was here in April. So the great dome in the center of the church was destroyed, and a couple of other walls were damaged. So the cathedral was remained bare essentially to the elements, and so there was some interior damage. And it's a very important symbol, and also physically for the Christian community.
I know Aid to the Church in Need largely financed the Cathedral of St. Elijah's restoration.
Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the challenges that you faced repairing it? Because I know the damage was significant.
Well, the first thing is Aleppo's position. It is very close to the border of Turkey, and because of that, it has been sort of on the front lines of a lot of the skirmishes and battles that are ongoing. So it's not a very simple area to work in, and it did cause some challenges in bringing materials and getting the jobs completed. But, you know, the Christian community there is very strong and really desirous of making this happen. So they really did a heroic effort in finishing it. And our donors were generous enough to help pay for it.
Well, the Christian community in Aleppo, I know, has suffered greatly over the years as a result of the civil war in Syria. What's life like for Christians right now, and have things gotten any better for them?
Oh, it's awful. It's right now, the average salary for a wage earner is about $95 a month. And it costs in the neighborhood of $100 to $150 a month just to maintain a residence, because people aren't in their homes. They've had to rent houses away from where the battles are. At least 2/3 of the Christian population has left. They're relocated in places like Lebanon and Jordan, and perhaps in Europe, the United States. So the community has dwindled. The economic situation is bad. There's security issues. There's problems with transportation, moving between place to place. But like I said, they're very steadfast in their belief that they belong there and their history. So it's important for us to support them.
Maronite Archbishop Joseph Tobji of Aleppo was quoted as saying St. Elijah's restoration and reopening is, quote, a way to tell the people in Aleppo, in Syria, and in the world that we still exist. That is a very powerful message. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, one of the other things he said is that our voices must sing out in praise within this place. And it's very important. You know, for us here in the United States, we often go to old churches and they're built in the 1850s or 1860s. This is a community that was founded by the apostles. And so for them, this is historic Holy Land, and it is. So it's very important that they have an opportunity to stay there and an opportunity to have a place to come together. And churches represent a big part of that life in the Christian community.
Well, Edward, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it, and thank you for what you do. Edward Clancy, Director of Outreach for Aid to the Church in Need USA. Thank you again.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And finally, tonight, the Vatican is hosting its first ever summer camp. It is for the children of its employees. And yesterday morning, a surprise visitor stopped by. Pope Francis joined 100 children for breakfast and visited their play areas. The Holy Father encouraged the campers to make new friends. It was part of the day's activities that included sports and prayer. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We leave you tonight with the bells of St. Vitus Catholic Cathedral in Prague. They are ringing again after being silenced during the coronavirus pandemic. Good night and God bless.